Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha. I head up brand awareness at Reveal. Each week, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. Our guest this week is Brian Wilson. Brian is a managing director at BDO. He is in the Data Breach Advisory and Cyber Forensics Services practice group, where he heads up the Data Breach Advisory Service. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, George. It's an honor to be here.
Glad to have you here. So before we jump into the topics I know you would like to discuss, I'd like you to start out with your background leading up to your current role, so folks watching us know more about who we're talking with today.
Okay, happy to do so. I have about 25 years in the industry, and interesting story about me. I started out as an auditor, so I actually am still a CPA. And I caught one of my clients, I helped one of my clients through an accounting issue that turned me into a fraud investigator. And then I did forensic accounting for about the first half of my career. And during that, it became apparent how important technology was to really solve problems quickly for my clients. And so I kept getting more and more involved in technology. And eventually I was a partner with KPMG. I led up their forensic technology services business in mainland China for over 6 years. I also brought in cyber forensics, or they called it cyber response at the time, into mainland China and Asia Pacific. And then I had the pleasure, after 16 long years with KPMG, I had the pleasure to go and work with Deloitte in Asia Pacific out of Hong Kong, where I stood up their cyber forensics business in Asia Pacific as well. And then, like many, during the pandemic, I was pulled back to home base here in Chicago, is where I live. And I had my own company for a little while, where I was a subject matter expert to Fortune 500 companies, providing advice around investigations, technology, cyber issues, things like that. And eventually I decided I really enjoyed being part of a team. And so I had the opportunity to join BDO and help them build really a brand new practice, which is around data breach advisory. So that's everything before, during, and after a data breach. I still focus, I still like the late night phone calls. I like to get the triage calls at 3 a.m. to help our clients in their hours of need. And so I still lead that business, but it's really a holistic approach to solving data breach issues, particularly given how common, ransomware is today, double ransomware, those types of events.
So solving data breach issues covers a whole host of different approaches, tools, techniques, philosophies. How do you see it?
It's almost a little bit like the wild, wild west at the moment, in terms of what tool, what technology, what talent is on the team, helping our clients solve their issues, what processes they use. For me, I've been in eDiscovery a very long time. I'm very familiar with the EDRM, and there are some situations where that kind of workflow still makes sense, but by and large, with a data breach, you're kind of looking for the needle in the needle stack, right? You're looking for that PII, PHI, highly sensitive information that's been outside of the data estate for an organization, and you got to do it quickly. Timelines are very tight, sometimes 72 hours, depending on the geographic location of the data subjects. So these days, what I spend my time on is evangelizing AI and machine learning, not general AI, but really narrow AI, which is focused on what is the particular issue you're trying to solve that day. So you've got a client or a customer that's sitting in California and New York versus Ohio. The AI that you apply, the algorithms you will run might differ, because speed to response is the most important and critical aspect.
We'll come back to AI in a moment because I very much want to hear your thoughts on that. Before we get there, give me an idea of what a day or 3 days or whatever it might be in one of these situations looks like from your vantage point.
For me, having done so many, it's calm waters. A lot of what I do is a calming effect. And if I've been working with my clients ahead of time, where we've done some preparation, we've done some planning, we have an incident response plan, we have other tools in the toolbox, so to speak, and we've worked on communications, then it's not so bad. We plan for it. We've done the tabletops. We know how to execute it. It's still a crisis, when all of your systems start locking up and you get the ransomware note demanding Bitcoin, things like that. It still is a crisis situation. But where I'm fortunate enough to have worked with clients ahead of time, it's a much easier scenario. Those that call me out of the blue and they don't know what else to do, it can be disruptive. It can be very challenging for them. But again, within BDO, we have the people, we have the processes, right? We have the technology to help them quickly, and so we do. But the first 72 hours, you don't get a lot of sleep. I'll tell you that much. It is one of those things that you got to move quickly to solve the problems as fast as you can. So, but generally, you can get through it in the first 72 hours. You can get a good hold of, you can really get a good understanding of what the issues are, and really a good roadmap to how to solve it. And that drives everything else.
What do the major steps in that first time period look like?
Well, the first one's the triage call. That's always fun. I take those any time of the day or night, but you're on the phone usually with a company and their outside counsel and inside counsel, and they're telling me, I've got a ransomware event. I just got this notice on my, on my server or what have you. What do I do? And I start asking some basic questions. What does the ransom note say? So I can identify the threat actor. We will go do some threat intelligence research to figure it out. But also, what has the company done? What steps have you taken, company? Again, if I don't know them and I don't know what the response plan is, they got to tell me. Well, we've got this thing deployed, this type of service deployed. We've started quarantining our networks, right, et cetera. So I get a lay of the land in that first 30 minutes to an hour from the initial point of contact, and then we start helping them depending on what they need.
When do you first begin using AI in that process, and what AI are you using? What capabilities?
I like to use AI as much as possible in the process, but some of that, for example, in that first 72 hours, it's blocking and tackling. But part of that might be obtaining the data. So that's moving data from a client to our services, so we can process that data quickly, get it ingested. There's a lot of machine learning also that we apply depending on the type of client and the industry and the data sets we're working with. So a good example is if a client's CRM is outside of the data estate and it's a large database, your traditional e-discovery platforms aren't designed to handle CRM. So we have a whole data forensics team that will take care of that, dig in deep, identify what information's in that database that might be subject to regulatory reporting requirements. But that's an example of kind of machine learning AI. But really, for me, where it comes down to is when we get that data set that we know needs to be looked at, that's where we start applying the AI rules and the methodologies in the most efficient way. So as I said, if I've got a client that's operating in California, I'm starting there and pulling out the AI model for California and looking for PII, PHI data elements that would be relevant to the California privacy laws, and then kind of move down the list from there in terms of a prioritization. So that methodology lets us get, identify information more quickly and start to get answers out to the clients more succinctly than some of the other approaches are. Apply one massive, AI model that covers every jurisdiction on the planet, and you'll be, sitting there 3 days from now and waiting for the output. That doesn't help anybody, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help companies stay calm either.
So let's get a definition, and then we'll come back to those AI models. You mentioned a term of art, data estate. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I used to say data outside the corporate perimeter, but now because data is in the cloud, it's onshore, it's offshore, it's in the cloud. it's on-prem, right? So it's wherever your data lives and wherever it's being managed. Sometimes it's with a third-party provider who's hosting virtual machines for you, right? So your data state is where your data lives. So it's no longer a perimeter. That's what I mean by that.
Thanks. Tell me now more about what you're doing with AI models. What type of AI models? Where do those models come from? How do you deploy? As much detail as you care to share.
Well, I won't give you all my secret sauce, but I will tell you that I'm a big fan of continuous learning models. So and applying them strategically in order to prioritize the review and get information out quickly. So for us, California is a great example. They just had another privacy law come on the books at the beginning of January here. So it's and the data elements subject to California, it's a pretty long list. It's got biometrics in there. It's got everything under the sun. So we go and we create our data models based on the regulation. And then as we apply our data models looking for not just social security numbers and driver's license numbers, but in California, biometrics and other bits and pieces, we use our AI models to identify all of those key elements. And then we have to pull it back into the individuals that they may be tagged to, right? So if a consumer's now provided an organization their personal information in an email, or through a CRM application or some kind of client-facing application, now we have to pull all the data elements that are relevant to those individuals together. And sometimes oftentimes within an organization, you'll have, more than one, in my case, Brian Wilson. I could be Brian Wilson. My first name's actually Charles, so I could be Charles Wilson. I could be Charles Brian Wilson. I mean, there could be 6 of me inside of an organization. So the first issue is really getting the data elements linked back to me, and then which is the right me? Which one is the right me? And then the third element is really, if I'm going to get a notification because I'm subject to those laws in California, where do I live? How do I get it? What's my current address? What's my email address if we're going to go that route? So that's where AI really helps, getting through all that data, linking it together, making it meaningful, and then ultimately it's a legal decision on when organizations notify, because some states have a threshold. You got to have so many individuals that whose information's outside of the data estate for notification. Like the Office of Civil Rights also would apply for healthcare organizations and VA, those types of issues. So, but we move fast. We're building models all the time and we're testing models all the time. I think the thing that is not challenging, but the thing that we tend to spend a lot of time on is not just the development of the model, but it's feeding the model and training the model, and then really looking at the results to make sure that we're getting precision and recall on our results as the model is deployed. And one of the things, actually, the product that Reveal has is quite nice. It's not only is it a continuous learning model, but it's portable. I can reuse it. It learns. So it's really nice because I don't lose the traditional TAR models. They're kind of built for each engagement, right? And so you seed it, you feed it, it learns, and you use TAR, but that's limited to that engagement. What we are doing and what we're building is and using is models that not just learn for the one engagement, but models that we can continue to build on and hone and refine and mature as we continue to help our clients. And that's what's really exciting about it for me.
So I think I hear a few things in what you're saying. Let me know if I'm understanding correctly, and if not, point me in the right direction. First, from the sounds of it, you don't have one data breach model for the world. You've got different models, at least by location. You used California as an example. It sounds to me as if you don't have then just one model for California, but many models that you're using. Am I understanding correctly there?
By jurisdiction, so California, yes, we have one model for California. You got another one for New York. All right, there's a couple of other states that have higher jurisdictional requirements, so we built those out. But as for example, China just released its own set of data privacy requirements, and that one's a really difficult market to begin with. But just to make sure you understand it, you got to build out a model for China that meets their requirements as well. So we keep them, we build them out based on priorities, and then we do what we call as a stack and pack, right? So recent example, we had a client where it had operations in 6 different countries and 15 different states. And so as we were working through the prioritization for them, we were looking at, okay, well, you have ops in Singapore. Singapore has a 72-hour notification requirement. You have ops in California that, that also is in place. So, stack and pack those two right up front as an example.
And then you've several times mentioned that you build the models. So I understand from that the model building is happening within your organization, not somewhere else, right?
Correct.
And then who all do you have to build those models? Is it one person hidden in a back room somewhere, or what's happening?
We've got subject matter experts who are deep thinkers and have data science insights and understanding. There's a team that does it, and we have a prototype scenario where a lot of what our kind of pre-model design work is done in Azure, because it has cognitive services and all sorts of other nice services that are complementary to what we're trying to get done. So we'll do a lot of testing and modeling in Azure, for example. But as those models are ready, to be go to market, so to speak, or that's where we can move those models into the platforms. And really, as I said, with the Reveal platform, we can put it right in there, and then again, we can start maturing it right in the platform, which is really nice.
And then, as you said, these models aren't static; they continue to develop and mature, presumably.
They learn, they mature. And again, these are narrow AI models, right? So I know there's always this big question mark in the marketplace about AI bias, but that doesn't apply to what we're doing, because we're looking for very specific data elements that have been contextualized by the AI model to find the information, right? So it's a totally different thing. But as it grows and mature, then ultimately what that results in, you get when a data breach review happens, you get a set of data that has PII in it, needs to be reviewed, and you have a set that doesn't, according to the AI, right? And so, an immature model will have a higher number of false positives in both sets. A more mature model has fewer and fewer and fewer. I mean, I don't think we've ever had a zero rate, but ultimately that's the goal, is to get to a point where the models are so mature, we've got zero false positives. And then there's a question about, well, how much do you trust the AI? Do you have to look at everything that's in the PII set? Probably. What about the null set? Do you still need to look at everything if you're fully mature on that model? I think it's going to be a while before our clients are ready to say no. You have to do some testing. But I hope, someday, that's what it's designed to do, right? Is to reduce the burden and reduce the amount of time spent on looking at documents that aren't relevant to the problem we're trying to solve.
And what is your client's view on this approach? How do they react? Are they concerned, leery, excited? What?
Well, you've got AI. Depending on who you are and what you've heard, you can be scared of it. You think Terminator, Skynet type stuff, right? You've still got some individuals who see that. But once we explain to them the benefits of AI and how it works and where the comfort level is and how we go about validating the AI that we apply in their particular case, they get comfortable with it, and frankly, they appreciate it, because we're getting to the answer much quicker than, the fallback is always, we can do a traditional EDRM approach, right? A linear review, which takes a lot longer. It's not necessarily going to give you any better results. You might have way more false positives if you're applying search terms or regex expressions through a platform. You're going to get a lot of false positives. That's expensive, right? So ultimately, when we have these conversations, even with some of the clients who aren't so familiar with AI, they can understand the cost savings at the end of the day.
Are there any I don't know that there are, but are there any jurisdictional challenges that apply, either different jurisdictions within the United States or in different countries?
There are. China's a good example because of data sovereignty laws. If you got a data breach and your data sitting in China, then you have to do the work in China, which again is why when we build our models, we want them to be continuous learning and portable, and we do them targeted, right? So these are jurisdictions that we know you got to do the work, you got to do it there. You have to have a team that's been trained, you have to have the technology that's available, and you have to really do it in that location. So we're very aware of and sensitive to data privacy laws and data sovereignty laws and those types of issues, which are highly relevant. We don't want to make a data breach worse if we're doing a data breach review. So definitely part of our business model.
At the Early on in the discussion, you talked about data inside the data estate and mentioned data outside the data estate. How does your approach differ? And if so, how, depending upon where data falls?
Well, so the data outside so I'll give you an example. It's common in a ransomware attack that the threat actors will do what's called proof of life. So they'll show you a snippet. I've exfiltrated data from your network. Here's a snippet of what I've got, right? So the organization doesn't know if that's everything. Is that, they have no idea what actually is in the hands of the threat actor until they've conducted and really feel comfortable with the investigation results. But so largely, when we identify that, we get data outside the estate one of two ways. A threat actor may have published the data on a public shame site, so the data is already out there, and we can go and download it like everybody else. That's data outside the state, and not where anybody really wants to be. But then we also then will take a look at the data inside the estate and work with the company to understand. There's some business intelligence we need. How did you organize your files? What information that may be outside the estate? What part of that has a higher degree of PII, PHI, notifiable data elements in it, and we'll work with the company again to keep the focus narrow, keep the scope as small as we can, to make sure that, but still doing a complete engagement.
So you are using AI models as part of that active or in connection with that active learning. You are using entity extraction capabilities. What other AI capabilities are you drawing on, at least that you're willing to discuss?
Well, a fun one is the image classification, because that's really kind of computer vision. So, as an example, and, a lot of our healthcare organizations will, when you check in to see your doctor, they'll scan a copy of your driver's license right along with your insurance card, right, for whatever reason. And if that data is now outside of the estate, well, that's a picture of your driver's license. And so it becomes relevant in terms of a data breach because of your driver's license number, your birth date, your address, all of that's there. And so but if you're looking at it from a standard processing standpoint, it might just look like a PDF, like any other PDF. So if you use computer vision, right, and computer learning that's an image, it gets classified as having PII and or PHI as part of that data set. That helps us separate, right, that data from the rest, right, the contracts that are PDFs that potentially don't have any PII, PHI in it. So it just makes it a little bit easier, because if you're doing the review, you want to start getting answers to what PII, PHI is in your data set as quickly as possible, and you can start with those images, right? Driver's license, passport, driver's license, check. Okay, we're starting to build our list.
Any other forms of AI that are in play here for you?
There's a few more, because I don't want to give away all of my secret sauce.
Of course not.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's some challenging issues associated with doing this work, but well, I'll tell you, I think the best way if anybody wants to find out, you can go and look at the Azure stack and look at the cognitive services, and we pretty much use all of those in terms of how we build our models, and we pull them into our reviews where we need to.
You're doing work, as you said earlier, not just within the United States, but in China, and I imagine in many parts of the world. That, of necessity, entails dealing with content in many different languages. How do you address that part of things?
Yeah, we can translate on the fly, and actually a lot of the e-discovery platforms are getting pretty good at that as well. So, part of our workflow, we will use the platforms, for what they're designed for in terms of ingestion, processing, culling, right, deduping, denisting, narrowing that data as much as possible. So we get foreign languages, we rely on a lot of, the platforms can translate a lot of that on the fly. If not, again, we use cloud services to assist where we need it to translate it as well.
Similarly, you must, I imagine, be dealing not just with pictures, but with audio and audio-visual files. Do those pose particular challenges, and how do you deal with those?
It depends. I will tell you, most of the time, no, because what we're looking for are the PHI and the PII data elements that need to be tied to a data subject. And there's always an argument that somebody could be on a recorded call into an investment banker and they're talking, my social security number is whatever, right? So there's always that element. But we don't see a lot of that in terms of how we go about getting the work done. Largely, it's the structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data types that we're culling through and identifying data points from.
A piece of this, you mentioned structured data types, has to be potentially dealing with a wide range of database types. How do you approach that?
Well, within BDO, we have a data forensics team that specializes in that, and they are wonderful. They can pull apart any database, and whether it be CRM or sales or whatever, and we have them go through that, and they tell us what's in there, right? So databases, structured databases, are a little bit easier once you have this, the schema, and you know what the tables live in that database. It's a little bit easier than to say, okay, that's the table that has all the customer addresses, and that's the table that has their health information. Got it. So that makes it a little bit easier. And frankly, once we're to that point looking at the databases, it doesn't have to go through necessarily all the AI processing. We can just put them right on a data subject list, right? In terms of like start building a list of data subjects that might need to be notified. So structured data kind of can take a big chunk out of the review time, which is good.
Definitely, especially with tight schedules.
Yeah.
For organizations that find themselves on the wrong side of an event like this, and of course have very little time to figure out what to do, who to use, how it should be done, what words of wisdom do you have for them?
Well, I don't like this saying, but there's one in the industry. You either have been breached or you don't know you've been breached. So I think that sounds corny, but frankly, you need to be thinking about it. The best advice I can give any organization is understand what data you have and where it lives in your data estate. Because a breach is a breach, but if you know what data is secure and locked away in what part of the organization, and the threat actors didn't get to it, then you don't have to go through the extra heavy lifting of a data breach review, and you don't have to deal with the regulatory timing requirements as well. So that would be my advice. Think about it a little bit. Get a little bit of advice. It's not that expensive to just say, what would you do to somebody like myself or other providers in the marketplace? But the worst thing you can do is ignore it. And if you do find yourself having a breach, the second worst thing you can do is don't take it seriously and decide not to report it out, because there is some significant fines associated with that type of behavior.
So it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, one of the key things companies can do, probably the biggest thing they can do, is not wait until they've been breached, but instead contact someone like you ahead of time to get a better idea of what their risks are, and what they can do to prepare and plan, recognizing that in any of these things, no matter how much preparing and planning you do, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, right?
But that's right. Yeah, just a little bit of preparation goes a long, long way.
Okay, well, Brian, thank you very much for joining us today. Brian is, again, Managing Director, Data Breach Advisory and Cyber Forensic Services at BDO, where he heads up the Data Breach Advisory Service. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Brian, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, George. I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate it. And obviously, I'm passionate about data breach and all the things I can do to help clients. So happy to talk anytime on the subject.
Thank you.
All right.